Have you ever wondered what the stages of grief are? Grief is a universal experience touching every corner of humanity. One way we've tried to understand this complex emotion is through the Kubler-Ross model, a concept that's gained widespread recognition. It suggests 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But remember, grief isn't a one-size-fits-all experience. Not everyone goes through these stages in the same order or even experiences them all. Let's dive deeper into the stages of grief according to the Kubler-Ross model. The first stage of grief, according to the Kubler-Ross model, is denial. Denial is an emotional defense mechanism that helps us cope with the initial shock of loss. It's like the mind's way of buffering the heart from a harsh reality it's not yet ready to face. We might find ourselves refusing to believe the situation, or feeling numb and disconnected. Let's take, for instance, the case of someone losing a beloved pet. They might leave out food for the pet or expect to hear the jingle of a collar, only to remember that their furry friend is no longer with them. This is denial. Denial can also manifest in the form of disbelief. We might hear words like, "This can't be happening," or "There must be some mistake." It's a subconscious attempt to reject the hard truth. Denial, though a tough stage, is a necessary step in the grieving process. It allows us to gradually accept the reality of our loss at our own pace, and prepares us for the emotional journey that lies ahead. After denial, the next stages are anger, bargaining, and depression. Let's dive deeper into these stages, starting with anger. When the reality of loss sinks in, it's common to feel a surge of anger. This anger can be directed at anyone: the doctors who couldn't save your loved one, friends who don't seem to understand your pain, or even towards yourself. You may question, why me? But remember, anger is a natural response to feeling helpless or powerless. Next comes bargaining. This is where you might find yourself trapped in a whirlwind of what if and if only statements. You could find yourself bargaining with a higher power, promising to change your ways if only your loved one could be returned to you. It's a way for us to regain control when we feel the most helpless. Depression, the 4th stage, is often characterized by deep sadness and regret. You might feel numb, have trouble sleeping, or find no joy in activities you once loved. It's not a sign of mental illness, but rather, it's a completely normal response to a great loss. You're beginning to grasp the permanence of the loss, and it's perfectly natural to feel overwhelmed by this realization. But remember, these stages are not boxes to be checked off in order. You might bounce back and forth between stages, skip one entirely, or experience them in a different sequence. You might even cycle through these stages more than once. This is because grief is not a linear process, but a complex journey that's unique to each individual. It's also important to note that everyone experiences these stages differently. Your anger might look like frustration, your bargaining might be a quiet prayer, and your depression might feel like an emotional fog. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. These stages are part of the normal process of grieving, but remember, everyone's journey is unique. It's okay to feel angry, to bargain, to be depressed. It's okay to not be okay. Because in the end, these stages are not stops on a journey, but part of the process of healing. The final stage in the Kubler-Ross model is acceptance. But what does acceptance truly mean in the context of grief? It's not about waving a white flag or declaring that you're perfectly okay with the loss. Acceptance is about acknowledging the reality of the situation, understanding that the person we've lost is not coming back, and recognizing that our world has changed in a profound way. Let's imagine it like this. You've been on a ship that's encountered a storm. The waves have been rough and you've been tossed around. Now the storm has passed. The sea is calm, but you're in a completely different place than where you started. That's acceptance. It's not about liking where you've ended up or forgetting about the storm. It's about realizing you're in a new place and you have to start navigating from here. Acceptance doesn't mean forgetting, but rather learning to live with the new reality. Beyond the Kubler-Ross model, there are other perspectives on grief. One such perspective is offered by Davis and colleagues, who suggest that individuals who have experienced the loss of a loved one may undergo a profound process of making sense of the loss and finding meaning in it. This process can lead to a new appreciation for life, a greater value placed on relationships, and even personal growth. It's a perspective that shifts the focus from the pain of loss to the potential for positive outcomes and personal transformation in the grieving process. However, it's crucial to remember that the concept of grief stages isn't without its controversies. Some researchers argue that these stages may not be applicable to all individuals or cultures, pointing out that grief is a highly individual and complex experience. The notion of grief following a linear progression has also been challenged. Evidence suggests that individuals may experience a range of emotions and reactions simultaneously, painting a picture of grief that is far more nuanced and multidimensional than a set of linear stages. So, while the Kubler-Ross model and other theories provide a framework for understanding grief, they do not define or limit the grieving process. Every person's experience is unique and may not follow a predictable pattern or sequence. Grief, therefore, is a complex and individual process without a one-size-fits-all solution. So, we've explored the stages of grief according to the Kubler-Ross model and other perspectives. We've traversed through the realms of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. We've delved into the fact that these stages may not fall into a perfect linear progression for everyone, and that the grieving process is a highly personal journey. We also touched on an alternative perspective, emphasizing the potential for positive outcomes and personal transformation in the grieving process. This view highlights the process of making sense of the loss, finding meaning in it, and fostering personal growth, a new appreciation for life, and a greater value on relationships. If you found it helpful, please subscribe and like this video. Thank you for watching.